Start. Coming in quick. Everybody, we'll get started in just a minute here. I just want to give people a chance to get settled in and connected to audio. All right. I see 100 people and I'm sure more will be coming, but we'll get started. So hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few technical details and I'll be brief since I know you're all Zoom pros at this point. Just keep in mind this is Zoom webinar, so your microphones and cameras are disabled by default, so you don't have to worry about interrupting us. If you need to interact with the panelists or with us for any technical issues or questions related to content, feel free to use the Q&A feature. That's ideal. That way we can make sure that we get to the questions as quickly as possible. You can ask those questions anonymously. You can upvote existing questions and you can add your own commentary to existing questions. And you can also obviously use the chat feature if you just want to have a discussion. So without further ado, I want to hand it off to Tina Deneen.
Thank you, Mike. And thanks to all of you for joining us for today's webinar, the LER, what it is, why it is important, and your role in this exciting initiative. I'm Tina Deneen, Associate Executive Director at ACRO, and we are joined by an esteemed group of panelists today. To introduce our panelists, I present President and CEO of National Student Clearinghouse, Rick Torres.
Thank you very much, Tina. And as we are kicking this off, I wanted to just first wish that everyone is healthy and that their families are healthy and that your campus colleagues are healthy and safe through this rather unprecedented time. So, and thank you for joining us today. It is my great pleasure to introduce our panelists, starting with Marnie Baker-Stein, who's the Provost and Chief Academic Officer at Western Governors University. Alex Kaplan, who's the Global Leader, Blockchain and AI Industry Credentials at IBM. Andy Trainer, the VP and Chief Learning Officer at Walmart. And Shelby Stanfield, I think some of you may know him, Director of Service Innovation Networks, retired Vice Provost and Registrar from the University of Texas in Austin. So again, thank you for joining us today. So let's talk a little bit about the problem that we're trying to solve, and I'll put a little bit of context around this as it relates to skills. If you think about skills being mismatched or undermatched, this is a chronic issue as in lifelong learning. So as learners progress through their careers, they start out in one school, they may transfer to another, they may go from a school to a business in their first job, business to business, you know, as they change jobs, and then maybe they want to get retooled and learn some new skills or get new credentials, and they go back to school from the business. The problem is that because we have these mismatches, many times businesses will say that they're not getting the right students. Or when you take a new job, they'll say, hey, you know, I thought this person was better prepared. So this creates churn with respect to having a mismatch in jobs, and somebody goes and gets another job, or long training cycles. Both of these create a lot of costs for both learners and businesses. And then when you think about a student that is, or a person who's a lifelong learner at a business and wants to go back to school, think about the fact that it's really hard for a school to give credit for what they may have learned on premise at work. And that lends itself to a longer path to completion, loans, costs, and the ability to do skill-based transfers are not well defined. So when you put all of this together, we really have an ecosystem where skills can be better implemented. And I'd like to now turn it to Andy Trainer from Walmart. And when you think about the problems that you're trying to solve for, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure, Rick. Really happy to be here with everybody. You know, I think for us, how to recognize what skills our associates have that they've gotten in the past, or they've gotten currently in roles they are working in the stores. Regardless of how they got them, where they got them, it's really a challenge for us we spend a lot of time looking for those skills and validating if they really have those skills. So that's one big one. The other one is, how do you ensure those skills are legitimate? Because anybody can claim any skill, but making sure those skills are actually attained and they have them is another challenge for us. And then on top of that is, how do you use, once you identified those skills and once you've validated that they have those skills, how do you use those skills to better place associates in the right places at the right time, for whether it's promotions, whether it's just new roles, new areas of the store. If you think about a lot of the things we do in our stores, there are certain tasks that you have to know how to do that are skilled tasks. Decorating a cake, checking out customers, working in the financial services area. So knowing who has those skills will allow us to schedule the right people at the right place at the right time to help us better serve the customers.
Thanks, Andy. Marty, why don't we turn the attention to education and higher ed? Can you talk a little bit about some of the big university problems that we're trying to solve for here?
Sure. Thanks, Rick. I'm super glad to be here. At WGU, we have 4 professional colleges: Teachers College, College of Health Professions, College of IT, College of Business. And as a competency-based university, but just as a university, it's really important for us that we are explicitly surfacing value to students with every competency and course and sub-degree certificate and degree or credential that they attain. That's a big part of our promise. And for us, the way to do that is by attaching each of these achievements, from the most micro, which is a competency, to a degree, to skills data, and skills data that we understand is marketable and in demand by employers. And that could include enduring 21st century skills related to critical thinking or quantitative reasoning or cross-cultural communication, as well as more dynamic technical skills across time. And so for us, we want to be able to, as students are creating that record of skills-based achievement, to surface that to them in their record, and ultimately to allow them to share those validated skills to employers who are looking for them, like Walmart or like IBM. So that's a big part of the problem that we're trying to solve, is incremental value along the way to degree. As well as you mentioned, Rick, being able to take skills and achievements that students have earned in other non-academic contexts and more easily and with less friction credit those into credential pathways.
Thanks, Marty, for those thoughts. And Shelby, over to you. Do you have any additional thoughts about higher ed and some of the problems that they're trying to solve for?
Yeah, so hello, everyone. And just to add to what Andy and Marty said, our work in this space shows that educational institutions are increasingly recognizing the fact that, students' grades in classes do not tell the complete story of the student's capabilities. And the historic academic transcript does not convey a complete picture of that student's achievements, particularly the student's skills, their competencies, those that are obtained through non-traditional learning experiences and through co-curricular accomplishments. So there are many problem statements, but I would say there's 2 fundamental issues that are being addressed here. The first, from the institutional perspective, is schools are interested in demonstrating the value for how they contribute to their students' maturation through their affiliation with the institution throughout their education journey. And in doing so, helps the institution demonstrate that the cost of higher education is truly an investment rather than an expense. And then similarly, from the student's perspective, students wish to differentiate themselves amongst their peers, recognizing that even at large public institutions, students have very individualized experiences, and they're looking for ways in which they can best showcase themselves to society, and whether that be to employers, future educational opportunities, and so forth. So in part, Students are interested in being recognized for their engagement both inside the classroom and also outside the classroom that represents who they are as a total person. Thus, this is the impetus for the Comprehensive Learner Record, or the CLR, that we'll discuss in a moment as a foundational element of the Learning and Employment Record.
Thanks, Shelby. And Alex, I'd like to turn it to you. And just can you quickly talk about the major problems that IBM is trying to solve for?
Yeah, and thank you all. It's great to be here today. And you know, they're not dissimilar from the problems that have been described by the others. But when we look across a global workforce of about 350,000 people, we look at the fact that our jobs in our particular industry are ever evolving and rapidly evolving. New technologies arise, new demands rise from our customers around the world who are changing their businesses in response to the changing business environment. And it's been particularly rapid over, you know, the course of 2020, given the pandemic. It's really important for us to understand not only the skills that all of the members of the IBM team have, but also to understand how those skills translate into new jobs and new careers so that people can stay, you know, refreshed and current and can continue to contribute productively to the work that IBM has underway around the world. So for us, it's really, again, it's, you know, really understanding the dimension and the skills that people have, making sure that we can use those skills as the basis for helping provide them really clearly articulated career pathways, as well as educational opportunities that exist both within an IBM in order to keep their skills relevant, and then applying those skills in the real world marketplace. Another big shift for us is the movement towards skills-based hiring. And so as Marty was talking about, you know, the relevance of the skills that people are building over the course of the time that they're taking a class, you know, we've become keenly interested in hiring people based upon the skills that they have, which for a company like IBM is a big change. In fact, last year, 15% of our new hires were hired strictly based upon skills, not upon, you know, based upon the college degrees that they had. So we're seeing this real shift towards wanting to understand what are the confirmed and validated skills that people have, help people use those skills to track their own career progress, and help us understand how we need to continually work with the, you know, talent we have across our organization around the world to make sure that it stays relevant.
Thanks, Alex. Now, you know, all of us here on this panel aren't alone in looking at this. As a matter of fact, a bunch of CEOs got together a couple of years ago to talk about this topic and actually to try to drive to take some action. So Alex, I wanted, IBM is part of this group, and they're working on these pilots. So could you talk a little bit about how this American Workforce Policy Advisory Board came together, and in particular IBM's interest in that, and then we'll go to the rest of the panelists as we describe who was actually in there.
So for many years, IBM has been focused on this issue around skills and the future of work. Because we're experiencing it within our own organization, and we are continuing to see it with our customers around the world. So when the federal government approached us around the idea of pulling together leading corporations in the United States to take a deeper look at the challenges that were involved, it was something that we were keenly interested in. We're keenly interested in it not only because of the fact that many of our careers that we have open and many of the specialized skills that we need are difficult to come by in the marketplace, but also because we really do believe that the world is changing in terms of the talent economy that's going on around there. So we were really pleased to be able to participate in a really important fashion with helping think through many of the issues from a policy and technical and social, cultural perspective around the implications of this for workers in the United States, as well as to collaborate on specific solutions that could be developed in order to enable this transition to a new skills-based economy, and we refer to it as new-collar jobs, and then also to grapple with some of the challenging issues around this in terms of equity, in terms of access to the technologies that are going to be required to this, in terms of educational opportunities for people, And so the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board gave us an opportunity to help contribute our thoughts and expertise to a broader group, as well as to collaborate across multiple industries in regard to the challenges that are out there, because this is facing everybody. I mean, it isn't unique to a technology company. It isn't unique to a large company. In fact, it affects every worker, every business in the United States. And then, of course, with the onset of the pandemic earlier this year, it just really accelerated the importance of this work and the thinking that we needed to do.
So thanks, Alex. I'm going to give the audience a bit of an overview of who's on there, and then I'd like to turn it to some of our panelists to talk about their involvement. So first, I'd like to start with the industry learning and employment record pilot leaders. There are 4 main pilots that are going through, and you can see that Walmart, IBM, Salesforce, and Workday are the industry leaders. And Western Governors from the education sector has been working very heavily with many of these pilots. I'm going to fill out the rest of the group so you can see here are some of the education participants in the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board. Here are some of the industry logos that have been involved with this project. And here are some of the federal and state-based entities and agencies that have been involved. And you know, we also have some other entities like the Milken Institute and the Boys and Girls Club. So let me turn it over to Andy Trainer over at Walmart. Andy, what was the attraction for Walmart to joining this effort and to actually, you know, step into to this group?
Yeah, it's very similar to what Alex talked about. You know, with Walmart, we have over 1.2 million associates in the United States. So trying to understand the skills they have before they came to us, while they're with us, in the roles they're doing, is something really important for us, from a speed to hiring, speed to proficiency, and speed to value to the customer. So anything that can help us better recognize the skills future associates or current associates have to place them in jobs to serve our customers faster is super important. I think the other aspect is the speed at which the changing need for skills has happened, you know, even in the last couple of years, but particularly the last 6 months, makes it even more important to be able to identify those skills faster and even identify what skills are needed for future jobs, so you can start to train people to be ready for those future jobs. So I think when we got the opportunity to work with other leading companies in educational institutions in the United States to figure out not only how to fix this for Walmart, but fix this for the whole country. Just because we do it doesn't make it, it makes it easier for us internally, but we need the ability to find good talent outside and then also to export good talent. Obviously, we always want to keep anyone we hire to stay with the company for as long as possible. But if an associate chooses to go somewhere else, that's okay. We want to make sure they're prepared to go out into the workforce and add value in other industries as well, if that's what they choose to. So that's really what's driving it for us, is how do we recognize skills? How do we make sure those skills are consistent across all industries, so we don't have to play the game anymore of trying to figure out what skills valid, which one's not, and then place them in jobs that best suit their skills and serving our customers.
Thanks, Andy. Marnie, why did Western Governors join this?
Well, we've been working for the last couple of years on going through all of our competencies. All of our programs are competency-based, so there are hundreds of competencies in every program, and tagging them in a consistent, standard way to rich skills descriptions, and expressing those competencies and courses and certificates and degrees as skills-based achievements. And the reason we've been doing this is to sort of firm up our own approach, but also so, as I said, we can surface these skills-based achievements to students on a skills-based transcript. Our students also have an academic transcript, but we wanted them to have a skills-based transcript as well, that they could ultimately share with employers. The difficult part for us was actually, well, there were many difficult parts, but the real difficult part was the employer part. And this initiative and effort and set of players allowed us to work really closely shoulder to shoulder with some really big employers to figure out the technical capabilities and standards needed to share skills-based achievements from a student information system to an HRIS system, and to really sort of imagine and pilot the technical infrastructure for the future of earning and learning. It was a once in a lifetime opportunity for us, and we took it gladly.
Thank you. So thanks, Marnie. So, we've been talking a little bit about the learning and employment record. And Shelby, can you talk a little bit about how that compares and how it's different, or in addition to the comprehensive learner record that I know a lot of us that are on this call have been used to hearing a lot of, three-letter acronyms, and now we've added another one called the LER. So can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, and that's a really great question and observation, in that there has been a lot of confusion around what is the CLR, what is the LER, and it's now the LER replacing the CLR. And, so the way I think about it is the building block of the learning component of the LER is the individual institution's CLR. The comprehensive learner records within an institution are focused on higher education learning wherever and however it ends up taking place. So in addition to focusing on the academic courses and grades and credit hours that are taken, that are typically reflected on the traditional academic transcript, CLR records seek to represent learning outcomes, competencies, skills that are mastered throughout the student's education continuum. So the learning could occur in traditional courses, competency-based education, learning outside the classroom, research experiences, internships, student employment through prior learning assessments, all these different ways in which students are engaged with institutions. So by extension then, the CLR becomes the foundation for the learning component of the LER. So they're very much complementary. So the key then to the CLR is storing these educational achievements, both the academic and outside the classroom educational achievements, in a digital wallet that learners can add, in addition to that, their employment achievements. And this then combined form the basis for the LER.
Very good. Thank you, Shelby. Now, underlying any ecosystem, we're trying to develop a new way of creating portability and understanding of skills and how those data can move. There's an ecosystem that needs to be developed. And Marnie, I'd like you to talk a little bit about your views of the platform components and then some of the major components that need to be true philosophically about this.
Sure. So I'll just give you a little vision of what we're hoping for the future here. So as I said, at WGU, we are now tagging all of our competencies, course outcomes, sub-degree certificate outcomes, degree and other credentials as achievements, and we're tagging those to skills. And that will allow us to create an achievement wallet where, in addition to the academic transcript, we are dynamically, as students earn competencies, are assessed as competent through objective and performance-based assessments, will surface those competencies and skills in their wallets, along with other artifacts of their experience, their portfolio of work. So essentially, there is the achievement tagged to skills that is then shared with a secure record and then surfaced inside of a WGU wallet, along with other data and artifacts of the student's experience that they own and can share with employers. So that is the WGU dream that we are well on our way to achieving, and we have several working pilots around particular programs and have done a lot of focus groups with students themselves who love it, because not only does it give them control of their record in ways that allow them to share it just in time, even before they graduate, in powerful ways with their employers, because most of our students are working professionals. but it also begins to surface to them metadata around employment opportunities in their localities or regions that are linked to the skills they have, which is incredible intelligence for them. So that's where we're headed, but we don't think that that is the whole vision. The whole vision is to create an enduring record of achievement across multiple providers of education and educational experiences that allow the student or the learner to curate a lifetime of skills-based achievements and understand the value of those achievements, where they are, as well as potentially open up their own personal skills profile to employers who are looking for talent. So that is the overarching vision. And Rick, if you want to go to the next slide. To execute this vision for WGU, we knew always that we were going to have to settle on a set of standards or protocols for allowing us to create a record that not only worked for us and the experience we wanted to create for students, but also would be interoperable with other educational institutions and with employers ultimately. The focus of the work that we're doing through the LER projects that were convened by the White House has really helped us settle in on decisions around these data standards that are helping us to do this and that we are sharing with others in the work like IBM and Walmart and Workday. And Salesforce. So I'll just go through them. We call this internally the diamond of interoperability. And it is a little bit of a diamond in the rough, but we are executing on this now at WGU in terms of our own achievement record. So the first component of it is the record itself, for which we are using the IMS, CLR, and CASE standards, and this allows us to enable assertions of achievement to a record from a variety of sources. Very flexible, allows us to do what we need to do, but also employers to, in some cases, to do what they need to do as well. Then we have our Open Achievement Standard, which is, we are using the Open Badges 2.0. And even though Open Badges, of course, is called Badges, which I'm sure they might go back and change that if they had a time machine. But even though we're using the Open Badge Standard, we're using the Open Badge Standard for every achievement in our ecosystem, from competency to course to certificate to degree. And we're using it as a container for metadata around those achievements, which includes skills. So for us, the skills were the most difficult component of assembling our diamond, because there really wasn't a great definition of skills or a standard syntax for skills. When we started talking about skills, people started thinking, oh, you're talking about your competencies. And for us, we said, no, our competencies are collections of skills. We're just talking about skill statements. And they're like, oh, you're talking about the keyword list of skills that you can buy from this or that third-party labor market offering. And we're like, no, we're not really talking about keywords here that were scraped out of job postings. We're talking about rich contextualized skills descriptions. So out of that came an emerging approach, which we call RSD schema, or the Rich Skills Descriptor Schema, that enables an open standard approach for describing skills in context and tagging those skills with metadata, for example, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics or from professional and licensure competency frameworks, or from third-party dynamic labor market intelligence, like from MZ. So that is how we're tagging our skills. And we actually, as a side note, found this work so interesting and important to this effort that we created an Open Skills Stack Alliance with a bunch of other big higher education institutions and employers to sort of keep sussing out skills definitions, standards, and schemas into the future, because it's a really critical component to what we're talking about today, and it's probably the least explored. And then finally, we also wanted to be able to, in this lifelong earner-learner record, have a way to start enabling a sense of pathways and understanding the composition of different trajectories to different career outcomes. And that is the open pathways standards for which we are settling in on CTDL and CTDL-ASN. So these are existing standards with the exception of skills that we're using, and that really do seem to work to promote interoperability, not just between educational institutions, but between educational institutions and employers as well.
Thanks, Marnie, for that overview. So let's talk a little bit about the pilots themselves. So I'm going to toss it over to Andy Trainer. Andy, can you talk about the LER pilots for Walmart?
Yeah, absolutely. So for our pilot, we're really focused on, at a retail perspective, what's the whole journey of this LER? So how do you identify the skills? How do you map skills to certain jobs? How do you badge against those skills? And then how do you share, like create an internal LER? And then how does the associate, if they choose to, because they own their own LER, choose to share that with other companies or businesses as they go through their journey? So our first step was really focused on skills, and kind of back to Marnie's point, we never did that before. We typically, when we were looking for someone to fill a role, we looked at the degree or the jobs they had and based the search on the job, not the skills needed for the job. So when we went back to start to map this out, it's taken a lot of work to break down what are the skills needed for a certain role, not the tasks you do for the role. And so we've done that for three roles within the store, and mapped about 85 different skills for those 3 roles, and then mapped those across other jobs throughout the store. So by the end of the year, we should have all 175 roles in the store mapped to skills. So now you know whatever skill you need to be a cashier translates to other roles within the store automatically. And then we're in about 100 stores today that we're testing these skills mapping and badging. We'll be in about 700 stores here in the next few months to continue to roll that out. And then we are partnering with IBM, WGU, LinkedIn, Workday to prove out interoperability of the learning record that we are creating, to pass it to different, whether it's to and from a university, whether it's to other technical platforms, or if an associate so chooses to share a badging or skill that's been validated on LinkedIn for future job opportunities. So we're well on our way with our pilot. We should have a working test to show the White House here in September.
Very good, Andy. Thanks for that. Alex, over to you. I know that we're involved with you in a very interesting pilot. So why don't you walk folks through what's going on here?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So the IBM-led pilot, it was really about understanding how do we do this at scale. So let me sort of start there and talk a little bit about what it is we're trying to prove through the pilot that we're doing. So if you think about this problem at a global scale, you have millions of organizations, hundreds of millions, billions of workers with skills, and we need to create a global ecosystem that allows for interoperability and exchange of this information. So when IBM started doing this work back in 2018 under my leadership at IBM Research, we really wanted to try and figure out, and how does one do this systemically at scale, such that we can get a network effect going, and we can put in place the core enabling pieces of infrastructure that are required to do it. And I think Marnie's 4 diamonds laid out the core basis of those infrastructure, as did the previous slide that showed the blockchain piece of it. So that was really our point of view. Is it's one thing to do this for an enterprise like IBM, which we have done internally. It's quite a different thing to do it so that any organization, any university, any enterprise anywhere in the world could participate in this. So what we decided to do is for our pilot is to prove out the core concepts under this. And so we picked a skill area pilot around cybersecurity skills. And the reason that we picked cybersecurity skills is it's a skill we understand well. It's also one that has the enabling pieces in place. And I noticed in the chat and in the questions around sort of how do you glue this together and where these skills come from. And so by picking cybersecurity as a career journey, we were able to use the NICE framework, which is a framework from the National Institute of Technology around careers in cybersecurity. We were able to match that with the courses that are available out of Western Governors University for people who want to build the skills for that, and we're able to match that against job openings. So it was a perfect kind of pilot to explore all dimensions of the standards that are going to be involved, the CLR, W3C verified credentials, the technologies that are going to be required, blockchain, open skills stacks, all of the different pieces of it, and then to really contextualize it in terms of an actual career, which you can see up here, Isabel Flores, and the journey that individual would take from, I'd like to have a career in cybersecurity, to I have the credentials and now I've got a job in cybersecurity. So it's a wonderful opportunity to really bring it all together, as well as to look at the replicable patterns that one could take this now from cybersecurity and retail, which is work we're collaborating with Walmart on, into industries like oil and gas, manufacturing, I mean, you name it, right? Hospitality, transportation. So what are the key components of doing this in every industry? So our pilot also will be available for show and tell in September, late September, when we demonstrated at the White House. And I think one of the things that's really exciting about both of the pilots is the fact that they show the genuine integration with like the HRMIS solutions and all the enabling technologies. So you can actually see how the pieces come together, the data flows, the standards that are required, and to have a real world working example of, yeah, we can do this and this can be done. And I think that'll take us to a whole new place in terms of considering now, how do we really make this available at scale, collaboratively, not only in the United States, but around the world.
Thanks, Alex. And one of the steps that goes on here is that the learner needs to be able to take advantage of some tools to help them in that journey. So Shelby, can you talk a little bit about the universal wallet that's being created in support of the LER?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Marty mentioned, one of the key elements here is having a wallet that can hold these digital achievements and allow the learner to manage those. And the key to any digital wallet is having it such that it can manage the contents in which then the learner can customize and aggregate and share with a third party, whether it's for education or employment. So what's being built for the LER by the Clearinghouse is a digital wallet. It's called MyHub, and that will allow the learner to identify where they are within their education and skills journey, matching their educational, vocational, professional achievements with what their vocational or professional career aspirations are, and see how those skills and achievements align with their future aspirations. What you see here is a learner's profile page, but it's a platform that supports their interests by displaying their progression, and then helps the learner understand how their education and skills align with the market.
Thanks, Shelby. Hey, Alex, can you very quickly talk about the Workday and the stuff that they're doing on the human resource MIS side of things?
Yeah, they've been a really vital partner here for us in terms of the pilots, both for Walmart as well as for IBM and for Western Governors. And the reason that they play such an important role here is much of this data is stored within an HRMIS. So when you think about, and I mentioned doing this at scale, we need to be integrated with the enterprise solutions that enterprises are using. And an HRMIS is sort of the natural repository for these skills-based wallets for an employee, as an example. So if IBM uses the Workday solution, and the concept is that that these skills would be available in our HRMIS system. So our human resources personnel, and our talent personnel can have ready access to the skills that the employee population has, as well as to use them for helping our employees figure out skills pathways. So they're just an essential component of it. The other essential component of their work with us is around interoperability. There are more than one HRMISs. There are multiple issuers. And so we wanted to demonstrate how we can move credentials between our enterprise systems and an HRMIS, and between a blockchain and Workday. And so they've been a really important partner for all of us in terms of demonstrating the technical level of this interoperability and working our way through that.
Thanks, Alex. So, we've all talked about the pilots, but I guess, one interesting question that's out there is, well, what happens next? And, pilot period comes this fall. So, Andy, how is Walmart thinking about life after the pilot period and sort of the road to scale and what happens next?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think from a Walmart internal perspective, we're going to continue to roll out skills-based search, hiring, placement throughout the whole company. So we will map out every job in the company based on skills. We'll badge against those skills and use those badges to create internal LERs that we can share across the company and connect people to the right job with the skills they have. I think after that, the big challenge for the next step for the pilot is, how do you make this usable for all industries, all businesses across the whole country? So clearly, the big work is creating some independent governing body that manages the skills taxonomy and the LER, so it's a very, if not free, low cost to entry for any business across the United States to use the same taxonomy to base the skills off of. So we're all using the same starting point. And then the true interoperability happens with the skills, which then starts to allow us to share resources and skills across different industries. So for us, it's really important that next step is, how do we create this independent body that manages these skills in the LER so we all can use them and contribute to them and continue to roll this out across the full United States.
Thanks, Andy. Marty, how about from your perspective, how do you see, as you go into 2021, this playing out for Western governors and beyond?
Well, for us, we're super excited about 2021 because we are going to be able, for all of our nearly 70 programs, to, as students are moving along to those programs, surface skills-based achievements to them with geolocated intelligence. It'll be version 1, but it is a step into the future for us. I think beyond WGU, I believe that as employers move to skills-based practices, and as our economy requires us to reskill and upskill across a lifetime, that skills are here to stay. And for that reason, individuals will in the future have ownership of their records. And the portability of their achievements on those records is super key. They need to be able to collect these. They need to be able to curate their achievements. They need to be able to share them directly with employers and have agency in their own economic and social mobility. That to me is the future. And to get to that future, as Andy said, higher ed institutions, whether they are competency-based or not, are going to need to think about how they tag educational accomplishment and learning outcomes of all kinds to value, how they surface that to their students, and how they surface that to their employers. And in this future, employers need to be incented to share their skills catalogs, their skills libraries with us. So that we can get to greater synergy and we can create more powerful pathways for earner learners as we move into the future of work post-COVID and beyond.
Yeah, and I think from what I'm gathering from your thoughts here, it's not only about being able to share the artifacts, but to share it in a way that it can be assessed and there can be progression, right? Clearly identified and carry the baton of learning from one type of entity to another, right? Which is a big part of this. I mean, so Alex, you know, I mean, you and I have talked a lot about this. I mean, would you call this an evolution or a revolution? And, you know, where are we in the continuum here?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I would call this a revolution. I mean, I think that, over the last number of years, there's been just a tremendous amount of good work done around thinking about the problem, thinking about the solution to the problem, both in terms of the technology, in terms of policy, in terms of governance. And, it's all really starting to come together. And, if you think about this in the context of tipping point theory, I think we're at that tipping point. And I think one of the things that's driven us to that tipping point faster than any of us had realized has been the pandemic. And so given the displacement of workers around the world, given the need for organizations to really scale up hiring for hundreds of thousands of workers very fast as we see these major shifts in the economy, given the requirement for educational organizations to retrain people and to help people make those transitions, there's a very, very compelling need for this new way of doing this to come to pass. And so skills-based it's happening. And I think it's going to fundamentally shift the approach everybody takes, the individual, the employer, education institutions, towards approaching the problem of talent in people's careers. And the other really, I think, revolutionary thing that's going to happen here, and I noticed some of this in the chat and in the comments, is we're really trying to give the individual much more control over this. We want to empower them with data. We want to empower them with the ability to take action based upon that data so that they can move quickly. There are a lot of impediments in the marketplace today which really slow these processes down. And we need to remove those impediments. And we think that as we create this infrastructure that we're all talking about here, people will rapidly come to it because that's the way business is going to get done going into the future. When you apply for a job in the future, you'll be providing your verified credentials through some kind of blockchain wallet. When you get your college degree, it's going to come to you in a digital form into your wallet, validated by blockchain. Artificial intelligence is going to be using that data to help you plot out your career pathway. Those career pathways will be aligned to, sort of recognized career pathways for individuals. So I think in the next year to two, we're going to see a pretty rapid movement toward this. And it's really going to change the way people experience talent.
Thanks, Alex. Shelby, you want to talk real quick about some of the resources? When we make this deck available for folks, can you highlight just some of the resources that we're listing here?
Yeah, absolutely. We just pulled a half a dozen or so here. And the first one is from the Chamber of Commerce and the T3 Innovation Network. They just released a LER hub that has aggregated a wealth of information that's been compiled from a number of different initiatives around the LER space. So there's videos, there's references to standards and so forth. So there's a wealth of information at the LER hub. IMS Global has a lot of information on both the K standard and the CLR standard, which has been adopted by a lot of institutions and service providers for a way to exchange CLR data. So that's a great resource to take a look at. The Office of Education Technology, the Education Blockchain Action Network, provides a shared space for conversation, community collaboration, open source project development. It's open to educators, administrators, technology providers. Again, just a wealth of information. Mentioned the Clearinghouse blockchain site gives updates on the work that we're doing in this space. And then lastly but not least is the signature initiative from ACRO and the Comprehensive Learner Record. Provides a lot of information on different initiatives going across higher education in building institutional CLRs, gives examples of some institutional CLRs, some of their case studies and so forth. So these are just a half a dozen of the ones that I think really pull together just a wealth of information around the LER and the CLR.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. And now I'd like to toss it over to Tina Deneen, who I believe has got a series of questions to ask. And so Tina, over to you.
Thank you, Rick. And thanks to all of our panelists for sharing this valuable initiative and this timely conversation. And you're right, we do have some great questions coming in. So if anyone else has a question, enter it in the Q&A box. And if you want your question directed to a particular panelist, please enter their name. So let's just get started. So the first question is, several years ago, the big innovation was MOOCs with badges, but we haven't seen that translate into market usefulness. E-portfolios have an even stronger track record. How is this different, and why do you think it will penetrate industry more than past efforts? And that wasn't directed to anyone in particular.
So, I mean, Alex or Marnie, you want to take a shot at that?
I'm happy to talk about it from an education point of view. I've been a skills warrior for many years, working on this across multiple institutions. And I think the difference today is the technology we have today is more advanced from an education point of view, in its ability to allow us to surface near real-time labor market insights to students through skills data. And even if all of these dreams, we fail to get there, being able to surface those windows and that intelligence to students about their current profile is very powerful. And so that's a big difference between today and 5 years ago. But I do believe that the other change, and Alex can talk about this, is that the demand side for employers is in shift as well in ways that it was not 5 years ago.
Thank you, Marnie. Alex, did you have something to add?
I think Marnie addressed it well.
Okay, thank you. So one exciting question is, which received several upvotes, was how can my university become a partner or be involved? For instance, we send students to Lockheed. Is there a higher ed group that we can join?
I can touch on some opportunities to be involved. I think there are multiple opportunities depending on where your institution is and thinking about recognizing different ways of learning and learning achievements at the institution. For those of us that have managed university curriculum, it's not an easy task. And it's a very unappreciated effort that's taken to manage university's curriculum. So a first part is just to study your curriculum and see how closely does it align with the relevance to the workforce and learning outcomes as it ties to your existing traditional academic programs, academic degrees, and certifications and so forth. And then what are some of the underlying academic policies that drive the nature of what you do when you're managing that university curriculum, and see then how do you adjust the institutional policies, institutional practices with this new insight with respect to the strategic interests of your institution, with recognizing different ways of recognizing learning. So once you get kind of the philosophical basis established and within your institution, then you can start thinking about, well, what are some of the opportunities to recognize learning? How do you codify it? How do you record it? How do you store it? And then how do you take advantage of the different standards that exist for packaging, for portability of those data? And then lastly, there are a lot of forums, as the resource slide showed, 6 different areas in which you can get involved. There's a lot of convenings and resources of people with similar interest and common ways of thinking along this space where you can convene and vet issues and opportunities and develop those synergies and those opportunities for collaboration. So I'd say there's a lot of different opportunities to get engaged and participate, all depending upon where you or your institution is and thinking about extending your evidence of learning.
And I'd just like to add, because we weren't on this slide, but of resources, but The Open Skills Stack Alliance is not, there are lots of different standards groups out there and folks working on the technology that underlies this new infrastructure. But the Open Skills Stack Alliance is really educational institutions and employers who are looking to move into skills-based education and hiring practices. They're at all levels of and all phases of that work, from the very beginning to more advanced use cases. And our aim is to create tools, and we are creating open tools that will allow people to more easily author skills at scale, but as Andy was talking about earlier, also share those skills in open libraries so that institutions that do not have big skills teams can have access to those resources. And it is our intent at WGU, as well as the intent of most of the employers and educational institutions who are participating in the Open Skills Stack Alliance, to publish our libraries and make them open for everybody, because we realize they are difficult to create, and we want them to thrive and proliferate.
Thanks, Shelby and Marnie. There was a question that Mitchell had about asking about how you determine the level of rigor with regard to validating a particular skill. For example, lowest level would be self-identification of the skill, and the highest level being a formal certification.
I can talk to how we're looking at it at Walmart. I think it's a great question, because it is a challenge. Otherwise, you end up in, no offense to LinkedIn, but today, you know, your mother could say you're a great project manager, and you're not really sure if they are or not. So we spend a lot of time validating those skills because there is no validation process. So what we're putting in a process into place internally that will be there's certifications, basically tests that they would have to take to validate. And then there would be some type of practical demonstration to a qualified trainer that would validate that, yes, you can do that physically. So you think about cake decorating, right? They can do all the courses, get certified, get badged to be a cake decorator, but to get that final certification, there has to be someone that can physically watch them and say, yes, they know how to do a rose on a cake, or whatever it may be. So there will be different levels of validation, which will be very important. And part of our push with the work we're doing with the White House is this governing body that I mentioned not only needs to keep the skills taxonomy and manage that, but also what are the validation criteria for those skills, so everyone uses the same process to do it. So if it's self-reported, then everyone does that and understands that if, you know, that can be the risk, or if there's certain test questions or certain criteria, that everyone follows the same. So we all can trust that those skills, once badged and certified, are actually valid. So that is work we're doing internally, and then pushing to make sure that when we roll this out across the country, that's part of the taxonomy as well.
If I could just add a quick comment, because, you know, IBM has been doing exactly what Andy discussed here for about the past 3 to 4 years. We have over 2,200 badges that are available to our employees. We've issued over 2 million of them. In order to get a badge, you have to go through a defined pathway to get that badge. That could be a course. For some of the more sophisticated and complex certifications, you actually have to go before a board to get approval. So we put a lot of work into how this gets managed from a governance point of view, to assure that when IBM issues a credential to an employee or to a contractor, that credential is validated and reflects real skill. And we'd be happy to share more information about the approach we've taken to that problem.
Thanks, Alex, and you too, Andy. And Patricia had a similar question. She indicates that skill requirements are changing so quickly. How would an institution keep up the pace with that? And how would they verify that a learner has a skill that wasn't actually earned at their institution?
So I can take that one. I actually think the majority of the skills that are in highest demand by industry are still our most enduring skill categories and families that have to do with communication, critical thinking, quantitative reasoning, etc. So a large percentage of skills have a pretty long shelf life in that respect. There are categories or families of skills that have a shorter shelf life that are associated with technical skills that are evolving sometimes on a quarterly basis, but those aren't generally the types of skills that higher education is preparing students with. In some cases it is, but not. In most cases, we're really focused on those enduring skills. Internally, at WGU, as others have said, we have a wide range of scale assessments, from objective assessments to really complicated and sophisticated project and performance-based assessments, to clinical and practice assessments that are done face-to-face. So we do all of those to assess enduring skills as well as technical skills. We do program audits for skills that really are looking on a regular basis. Are our skills that are surfacing through the competencies in our cyber program, are they still reflecting what is in demand in the marketplace? And so that gives us a sort of schedule for refreshing these programs to make sure that they are aligning. So we're doing all of that. Your question on how we then recognize, okay, students have earned these skills at Walmart or at IBM or in their military experience. That has still been very manual and complicated for us. And as I said earlier, was a big reason we got involved in this work, because if we can figure out how to automate that, the sharing of achievements with a meaningful skills-based currency that we can all read to, that's really going to help us in being able to give credit where credit is due for students coming from other environments.
And Marnie, specifically for you, someone asks, as they're concerned about resources, how heavy of a lift is it to get involved?
To get involved with the Open Skills Stack Alliance?
Yes.
So that's not a heavy lift at all. That's just becoming a part of that conversation. We're just getting started and working on our governance with a really great group of educational institutions and employers. The lift of moving from traditional educational practices to skills-based practices is always going to be, that is a serious lift. But I want to emphasize to more traditional institutions that even if you aren't competency-based, even if you're just tagging course learning outcomes or degree learning outcomes to skills, that's a great start. And while that's a lift, it is not rocket science, and it's not super hard. It's just a matter from a structural or cultural or leadership perspective of getting people to do it and think through it. But it does not have to be as granular as what WGU is doing for all educational institutions in the future.
Okay, we have a lot of open questions and not a whole lot of time. Let me ask a couple more. Lori says, I work at an institution whose transcripts are composed of narrative evaluations that are similar to performance evaluations. A lot of what employers say they want to know about a person can be discerned from these evaluations. However, many organizations feel it's too time-consuming to read these. So where do you feel like the just right solution is?
I think the just right solution is, both and. So when we're talking about rich skills descriptions, if we're tagging a cyber competency to 3 different rich skills descriptions, those descriptions can include in them metadata or narrative data about how that skill was assessed. And that way, when a student shares that achievement with an employer, they can see, oh, they have achieved this skill. And if they have time, which they don't all have time, they can also dive into the details of what that actually means and how that was assessed. And so I think we need to consider all use cases because there are some employers who are going to dive into those details and some who aren't. But if those details can be tied to a consistent, rich skills descriptor, then we still have a language that they can understand at a high level.
Perfect. And Craig asked, would this do away with the need for reference checks?
So this is Alex. I'll take that one. So it would certainly make the process more efficient. I mean, reference checks cover a lot of different issues for organizations as they consider whether or not to hire an employee or for whatever purpose they're putting them to work. So part of what we're doing here, part of the value that the blockchain would bring is that it would provide instantaneous verification that a credential that was represented was in fact authentic. So it would be one less thing that an organization might need to do in an alternative way for parts of that reference check to occur.
Perfect. So I want to thank all of our panelists today. We are running out of time and I want to be respectful of your time. Is there anything else that you want to add before we sign off?
No, this is Rick. I just wanted to thank everyone for their time today. And this is an evolving story. More to come on, as things move forward here. In particular, it should be a pretty exciting, time between now and the end of the year, as you'll begin to hear more about these pilots and what's being learned. But this journey, we're at the beginning of a very important journey. And I think, what's going to make it stick, from my opinion, is that we have identified what are the elements that need to be true to create this ecosystem, both from the enterprise and the industry standpoint, the higher education standpoint, the learner standpoint, and anyone that's providing learning. And I think the intention that we see is very strong to really make this work. The industry. The one piece we didn't talk about here very much, the return on investment for industries to actually get it right from a skills standpoint is very large. And I believe when it comes to students and determining the shortest path to getting a completion and the right completion, it will start weighing on their decisions as well and choices that they're going to make. Is it going to happen next week? No, but this will be the trend as we move forward. I want to thank all the panelists again for their great answers, and Tina, thank you and ACRO for the opportunity to share this subject matter with everyone.
Thanks for your insight, Rick, and thanks to everybody for attending. And again, I thank you so much, National Student Clearinghouse, for hosting today's event. And everyone, please take care and stay safe.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone.